So yeah, thank you so much, Andrew and Michael, for joining me. Of course, I think a lot of people will know you as the creators of Facade, the AI-powered interactive drama. It came out nearly 20 years ago now, which makes me feel a
Yeah,
bit
time
old.
flies. Man,
But obviously, you're still
we've got a
working.
little more gray hair than we
Yeah,
did, and a little less hair on top than we did when we made it.
surely
Yeah.
not. No, no way. Um, yeah, I mean, obviously, you are still working in that field, artificial intelligence, gaming, storytelling, academically, commercially. So we'll get on to a little bit about what you guys are working on now and what you've been doing since Facade. But let's kick off with a bit of Facade, not just because of the 20-year anniversary, but because so many people are still genuinely talking about it. I mean, even today, when I just went on the Reddit, which is also kind of crazy that there's a Reddit for this nearly 20-year-old game, but and it's active and people are talking about it. Lots of people had questions. Lots of people wanted to like come in and have a chat with you guys. I suppose, did you ever think when you were making this, it would have this kind of an impact?
I didn't know. In fact, I think uh, when we made Facade, one of our motivations was we really wanted to make the kind of thing we want to play that wasn't out there, where like the story itself is the gameplay, right? And that there's real sort of mechanics underneath the story interactions. And so this idea of interactive drama uh, was uh, was an idea that just really, Andrew and I were kind of obsessed with it. And like we wanted to play things like that. And so I think our original thought had been, okay, we'll put this out here. Sometimes we'd use the phrase throwing down the gauntlet. We'll throw down the gauntlet, and then other people will step up. And 5 years later, people will have kicked our butts with like amazing, even better interactive
Hmm.
dramas and so on. And didn't happen. And so Facade is still kind of standing out there relatively alone for this particular style of interactive storytelling. And so in some ways, I'm really excited and gratified to see that there's interest in this genre and interest in this particular game we made, but also there's a little bit of I don't know if disappointment's the right word, but I think it's a symptom of the fact that no one else really picked up the ball and carried it forward after us.
Right, there's obviously been tons of incredible games built and many with amazing AI. But right, there hasn't quite been. I mean, there have been some games that they call themselves interactive drama, and that's fair. I mean that, but the exact format that we tried to push forward in Facade, the idea of you and some small number of NPCs it's sort of like a collection of characters all getting on stage and making a short, tightly, structured drama happen in real time, like a play, like like a theater play, like classic drama in a sense. Right, it hasn't we haven't seen those products or other games yet, like Michael's saying, which is yeah interesting. And we have
Mhm.
some suspicions why. I mean,
Mm.
it's extremely difficult to technically build. We try to pioneer certain techniques to do it with Facade, and we feel like some of it succeeded, some of it failed. And Facade is far from perfect. It's an experiment. We know all of its flaws very very well. Right, yeah. So, and of course, now with the advent of large language models, there is a new kind of wave of power that could be applied to this genre. So we're excited about that. So
Mhm.
Going back to how it all got started, I mean, Andrew, you were, I believe, building kind of sort of artificially intelligent virtual pets in a way, I believe. And
right.
Michael, you were kind of a doctoral student in computer science. I heard you were also showcasing an artificially intelligent plant. Is that right? That reacts to
Yeah.
emails?
Yes, yes. So that was I was a returning grad student, so I was 30 when I went back for my PhD and went back specifically to work with this one research group at Carnegie Mellon that did research in interactive drama. And in fact, that was, that was their term. I think they borrowed that term from Brenda Laurel, but they were the only research group out there that was really,
Right.
had said like interactive drama is what we work on. And so
Right.
I
It was,
went
it was
back to
called the
school
the
to work
Oz
with them.
Project. The Oz Project
Yeah,
at Carnegie Mellon University, led by
Yes.
Joseph Bates.
yeah, yeah. And so, but while I was at CMU, I did, my general interest was sort of AI-based art and entertainment of all forms. And so, so yes, there was with Mark Bolan, one of my art collaborator friends, we built a robotic plant that sits on your desk and had sort of long-term, slow ambient behaviors based on reading the tone of your email. And we were using
That's amazing.
very kind of early text classification techniques called naive Bayes classification. So sort of early statistical text processing to analyze the email.
Wow. and
Right. And
it's sorry,
these
go.
virtual pets that I was building with a startup company called PF Magic in San Francisco. It was the world's first virtual pets, dogs with a Z, cats with a Z. Uh, Came out in 1995, the first dogs. And this is before Nintendogs. Nintendogs
Oh,
was
right.
8 years later. Well, Tamagotchi was out. That was big. So that was kind of the first pet virtual pet that was hit the mass culture, worldwide. And dogs and cats were the first kind of fully realized, fully animated 3D virtual pets, computer pets. Um, but as we were building those pets, I was it was a small team of people, animators, programmers. So I was kind of the lead um, AI programmer on it, and realized we wanted to make them more and more sophisticated. And I started to look at the research out there, academic research, and found the lab that Michael was at Carnegie Mellon. I had actually gone to Carnegie Mellon undergrad, but I had
Right.
graduated well before that lab had started, and started seeing the techniques to how to build behavior systems and behavior languages, um, and tried to adapt some of those techniques myself. And we were able to make these virtual pets that, when you built them and they started to interact, gave them personalities. Like little stories would start to emerge from them
Okay.
as they, like Tom and Jerry, like chasing each other around. Little snippets of stories would start to happen. So we started to see a lot of potential there. And then Michael and I met at an AI conference at MIT. It was a symposium, or maybe the first time we met was actually at the Lifelike Characters conference in Utah. Anyway, there were a lot of little conferences happening at the
Yeah.
time, mostly academia, but a few industry people like me were showing up, and that's how we met. And we started talking about working together.
And when did you hit upon making a game rather than any other kind of medium?
Well, we wanted to really make a drama, a
Mm.
story. And so, there's a lot of overlap between the word game, the term game, and interactive story. And there was, at the time, maybe some people might remember, there was this debate between ludology versus narratology. It was a huge academic debate. Are what's the most pure form of this? Is it purely a game, or should narrative be involved, but narrative kind of messes up the game? There was all this massive amount of theory, debating theory and so on. And we were really trying to bridge the divide and trying to make something that's both a well-structured story, but a real-time simulation that's,
Mhm.
you know, kind of a mix of top-down drama management as well as a simulation that can allow things to emerge.
Yeah.
That was our goal. So we wanted to make call it an interactive drama. So it's not
Yeah.
just a story or just a game. It's both.
And in
And
which
part of our
case, sorry, go on, Michael. Sorry, it's a bit of a delay sometimes. So sorry. Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
Oh, no, no worries. I was just going to say part of our design methodology earlier in kind of brainstorming the qualities or characteristics we wanted Facade to have
Yeah.
was just to invert what mainstream gaming was doing at the time. So it was sort of like, oh, mainstream games are in these like huge environments that you explore. So we're going to have the whole thing be in a tiny apartment. Um,
Yeah.
mainstream games have like, many characters. We're going to have two. The characters, you only interact with them briefly. And then you go on to gameplay. We're going to have like the entire thing just be interacting with the characters. So a lot of it was kind of this fun of inverting a lot of the uh, kind of design assumptions or design tropes that were common in games at the time. And of course, since then, we're kind of in a golden age of indie interactive storytelling now. There's so many awesome indie interactive story games. In fact, I just purchased a bunch about a month ago in a sale, so that I want to use as examples in my next iteration of my interactive storytelling course. But at the time, this was like 1999, 2000 era. There really story was basically communicated via cutscenes, and then there was gameplay. And so,
I mean,
Facade
the
trying
rich
to
history
flip
of
that.
there was a rich history of adventure games, of course.
Oh yeah.
And those were wonderful. Those are definitely are interactive stories, right, of a certain structure, and things like Monkey Island and all those all the genre. I know you've talked to some of the creators of those games, right?
Yes, yeah.
As well as text-based interactive fiction, and that's a whole huge indie community that's continued to thrive ever since the 80s, since Zork and on all the Infocom games. So that, and MUDs, and so MUDs. So there's a rich history of games in this space, but nothing that had quite been like you and a couple actors get on a small stage and try to make a drama happen in real time, embodied with language. That form, was what we were trying to pioneer.
And what was that part of the reason why you settled on this kind of evening, this dinner party gone wrong? Was that always going to be the setting for it? Did you have any other ideas about how it would work? Or
Well, we were, that we were taking so many risks in the first place with this project that we wanted to at least kind of get influenced or base it on some solid existing drama that we knew if we made it's sort of like that drama, influenced by, then we have eliminated some risk, and so we chose the play Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf by Edward Albee as one of our primary influences, and that's a famous theater play that got also made into a movie with Elizabeth Taylor, which is about a older married couple who invites another younger couple over for drinks, and things go crazy and all kinds of stuff comes out that night. So it's a classic play and movie that everyone should see, if they haven't already. So so that was a solid story that we really liked. But we're also we wanted to make a drama about people's lives, about the things that really happen in your life, not about rescuing princesses or exploring fantasy lands, which are genres we love, but we wanted to make something about real life, and get into try to figure out the gameplay about the psychology between people. And that's such a hard design problem that Facade only makes a small amount of progress on, trying to actually gamify or figure out what's a puzzle you can do with people's psychology. So
and I guess in that case, you settle on the setting. You decide you want to do this, but then, as you say, you're only two people. How do you go about starting off with this? Because how much of this were you sort of figuring out from scratch? I don't know. Were there any other games or examples you were able to look at, or were you basically designing all of these elements from scratch?
Go for it, Michael.
Yeah, it was on the technical side, we were definitely able to borrow a lot of techniques from the Oz project, this research group that I was part of at CMU that we mentioned in the past. So they, in fact, one of the technical elements we developed for Facade was a custom behavior language for authoring autonomous characters called ABLE, which just stands for A Behavior Language, which was strongly based on an Oz project language called HAP. ABLE basically has all of HAP plus like some additional features that were important for helping.
And the studio we then later formed, Playable, is PLAYABL. So a behavior language as part of the name.
Yeah. And then the person who developed HAP, the original behavior language in Oz, his name is A. Brian Loyal. So also ABL. So there was a lot of little, in references or whatever, obscure references. So yeah, there were definitely, that was probably a major technical piece that we were able to bring in. Our approach to drama management was very different than anything the Oz project had done. Their drama manager was a very different style. And so that was something, and this whole idea of using dramatic beats, a concept from playwriting and screenwriting as the sort of organizing principle for the drama management AI was something we had to develop on our own. And then I think a lot of the gameplay design, just like literally, as Andrew would put it, what's the steering wheel? I remember having many conversations where Andrew would say, "What's the steering wheel?" And sort of
right. And
challenge me about that.
Another big influence was Chris Crawford, a pioneering game developer whom some of your listeners might know, who's probably now retired at this point. He used to use the term, what are the verbs? Like essentially, what can the player do? Don't talk when thinking about games, don't talk about all the objects and the environments. Think about the verbs, the things the player can do.
Yeah.
So yes, so likewise, steering wheel are verbs, right.
Right. And a lot of that was we just had to come up with on our own. We were having to kind of invent basically new gameplay verbs that are sort of like conversational and kind of psychology, as Andrew was saying, it's kind of almost like a puzzle involving people's psychology. And so it's sort of like conversation and psychological verbs. And so a lot of that gameplay was just us figuring it out the best we could.
Right. And that kind of idea is evolved in your research, right, Michael, to the term social physics.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So there's one of the directions in my research group at UC Santa Cruz has been a whole research thrust on social simulation and using kind of social simulation to make experimental games. And so Prom Week was a game we released in 2012 that was a social simulation puzzle game. And so it was specifically like social puzzles. And we kind of used the term social physics to describe sort of referencing the idea of physics simulation based puzzle games, like Angry Birds, for example. An Angry Birds level doesn't specifically hard code in, here's exactly the shots you have to make with which birds to knock down the pig's glass house. Instead, there's like a whole space of kind of solutions that emerge out of the physics of, in that case, the Box 2D, physics engine. And so this idea of kind of story verbs or story physics and social and psychological physics that we started working on at Façade, we kind of generalized to this idea of social physics.
Right. So the verbs in Façade. So in most games, typical games, you can move, shoot, maybe open this, unlock this door with a key. In Façade, it was things like agree, disagree, bring up a certain topic, flirt, praise, criticize, obviously hug or kiss. And these all had sort of meaning within the simulation. And you could still move too. Physical movement did matter. Where you stood stand relative to Grace or Tripp, which objects you pick up obviously trigger behaviors and advance the beats of the story. Right.
As two people working on this, were there things you ended up having to leave out in terms of more detail or more endings or pathways? I imagine there was, because there's still so much in it.
Right. Yeah. No. So we started the project. Right, Michael, you were a grad student. I had just finished a whole wave of working on these virtual pets, the dogs, cats, and then eventually finished with a project called Babies, which was sort of moving up the evolutionary ladder from animals to humans. And now we jumped into way ahead into a marriage of adults. And we thought, okay, we'll work super hard for 2 years. Michael will be a grad student. I'm going to take some time off. I had saved a little money from working in industry on the pets projects. In 2 years, we'll get this done. It took 5 years.
Yeah.
calendar years. But in the meantime, right, Michael, you finished your thesis. I also worked part-time here and there to help pay the bills, but it was a ton of blood, sweat, and tears to get it done. And we would have loved to have put in even more content, but right, just even getting this much in there took all of that time. Yeah, partly because it was self-funded. And we built, not only do we build design it and write it and figure out how, what the game should be. We animated it. We built our own render. We also wanted the look of it to not look, we wanted it to be very expressive, but very, compelling to look at. And so it has its own visual style, as you can see, with lots of visual artifacts that are fun to, make to joke about all kinds of ways their faces break down. And there's still bugs, of course, where the characters might accidentally walk through a wall. And then we also, so besides the AI controlling the story and the animation system, we built a natural language understanding, the ability for you to say anything you want, and it can understand you. So there are these three massive components that we had to build as modules and integrate them. And so the short answer is this is as much we could possibly squeeze in, and it took 3 times as long, more or less, than we hoped. So we barely got it done.
One of his phrases Andrew liked to use was, "We'll shoot for the moon and maybe get into orbit." So that was so the facade design was the shoot for the moon design. And I remember at other times we've estimated that we maybe accomplished like 30% of our design goals, compared to how much of the story that we how would I put that? There's kind of like a potential story space of like possible arcs you can carve through the space. And our original design had a much larger potential story space, up to and including like you being able to like leave with one of the characters,
Right.
actually have the flirt go somewhere, right?
Right. Players, of course, would love to be able to seduce one of them and make and leave with them, right? And so we know that, and we would have loved to have done that, but that would have we just couldn't.
So
we ran out of time and energy to do all that. We used to do that.
There's some designs on paper for that, but they didn't make it into the game.
Yes, I think you're well aware of of how people play these games.
But we love we just to say we love all of the fans of Facade. Thank you so much for playing it over the years, and all of the videos and fan art and animation is just hilarious, and we're so excited, so happy that the community has enjoyed it.
And speaking of which, we've got a question from Video Games M12 in the chat, who says, "Will the front end for the game ever be open sourced?" I guess they're sort of suggesting, if a more modern version of the game could ever be developed using the technology we have now. But I guess just as a question in general, have you ever thought of doing that?
Well, we should say we know we need to port Facade to more modern platform. It still amazingly still runs on PC. You can't believe it actually still runs barely. We know we need, for example, port it to the Mac, to Mac OS. We all use Macs in general, and so we plan to do that. We just have it, and we can't believe how much time has passed. If Facade had literally stopped working on Windows, we would have been forced to make sure to keep it alive. We've been able to procrastinate on it, but we do plan to properly port it to the Mac and keep it alive on PC as needed. But we don't have plans to open source Facade itself. We can talk about that a little bit later when we talk about future projects.
Sure. Oh, okay. A couple more questions. This was a question from someone on the Reddit page, Pure Platinum Knight. What is the canon ending? Is there a canon ending? Did Tripp and Grace work things out, or did they separate?
No, there's no canon ending.
I thought you might say that.
The idea is this is a simulation, and depending on what you say or do will determine how they end things. So obviously, the flavors of endings are you don't really help them much, and they're kind of sad and say goodbye. Well, obviously, the first ending most people encounter is you get kicked out,
Yeah.
which is I think almost all of our favorite ending, so to speak, because it's hilarious. Or obviously, one of them leaves the other because they start to learn things about each other, but it's not very symmetrical, and one of them feels to blame or blames the other. And then another flavor of ending is that they both realize that they contributed a lot to their situation, and then they want to try again to work it out. But no,
Yeah.
all of them are valid endings.
That's good.
And that last one that Andrew mentioned, where they realize they're both contributors and they're maybe on the path to working it out, is I think the hardest ending to get, in the
Yes.
sense that you have to have figured out, you have to have actually engaged the underlying kind of simulation logic enough to know, to figure out what you need to say to them, right? And it's not that we made what you need to say to them like obscure, like an Easter egg or something,
No.
but it's that you actually have to engage their psychology. And a lot of people, when they first play, just like to say outrageous things because it's fun to get strong reactions from them, but
Yes.
you won't be able to progress that far saying only outrageous things. Like the idea would be that you would actually have to start thinking about, well, what would they want, or what would they need, or why would they say that? That's the psychological game aspect of it.
Right. And obviously that it seems like what the goal of Facade would be to help them to get to that point. So arguably that's the ideal ending, but honestly, they're all interesting endings, in our opinion.
Yeah.
Because
When
you're
when I,
exploring the space. It's like different alternate universes, and they're all
much like in
valid.
life. Yeah. Yeah.
one of our other design elements that kind of got left on the cutting room floor, unfortunately, is we wanted to have even more outrageous responses possible. One of our design references at the time was Crazy Taxi. I don't know if people
Oh,
remember the game
really?
Crazy Taxi, but that was
Yes.
so we sort of saw this as like, well, this is like crazy dinner party. Like we knew that people are going to want to push the boundaries and kind of see what happens. And so, we have some of that in there, obviously, with them, getting shocked, and, then you sort of, shock them 3 times and get kicked out. But that was sort of as far as that went. And we
Yeah.
actually would, ideally in a perfect universe, there would have been more content available for that outrageous, kind of the Crazy Taxi playthroughs of Facade.
Right. And seeing what people have done playing Facade and enjoying it and
Yeah.
recording themselves, that is the most entertaining way to play Facade, is you would act crazy, they play it straight, and hilarity ensues. So that we understand, like, if whatever future projects we build, that's gonna be a major way you can play it and have fun with the drama, is to act crazy and see how the characters try to deal with you, and essentially in the improv sense, accept offers. The game won't shut you down for doing that. It'll try to work with you.
Right. Yes.
Say the yes and type of style of improv.
I mean, you're talking about sort of being kicked out. I've got to ask, why is melon the word that you decided on that would
No,
automatically
no,
eject the
it's
player?
that word, and there's many other words that you can trigger them with
Okay.
that are, and it just so happens the public latched onto that
Yeah.
one kind of obscure reference, that's not was not by any means it's meant. It's they have full knowledge of the English language, so
Yes.
for some reason that became the meme.
Yeah.
Funny. We did not plan that.
No. Okay. But so there are other words that you could just say and they just eject you.
Yeah. Maybe that one
Other
was
word.
one of the more obscure one, I guess, that would
Yes.
arguably.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, they definitely, basically the natural language parser has a list of words that could be taken to be derogatory or obscene in some way.
Yeah.
So there's sort of like just a list of those words, and then melon is the super obscure one
Yeah.
that people kind of stumbled on.
That's funny. I always wondered, yeah, because it did seem very random, but as you say, I guess it is in a sense, and that's why people picked up on it.
Yeah.
Ruby does ask, and I'm not sure about this, but it's an interesting question in the chat. Was just asking, do either of you have a theatre background? Because obviously, you do. You're talking about sort of psychology, stage plays. Were any of you part of the theatre, or at least interested in that kind of element of it?
Yeah, a bit. I came more from filmmaking.
Yes.
So I undergrad, I majored in computer engineering and kind of concentrated in filmmaking, and made a lot of one feature length film and a bunch of short films, in the space of things like Facade, and always have loved theater. And I think when Michael and I started working on this, we realized, yeah, what we want to build is closer to live theater. Arguably, a real-time game, if it's a simulation, is like live versus making something cinematic with edits and time passing and so on. So the purest form of this is more like theater. And the virtual pet site worked on, again, were live interactions that ended up being more theatrical than, say, cinematic. But Michael, you also worked on, for example, Terminal Time, right? This interactive
Yeah.
cinema project.
Yeah, yeah. So I've done some work in sort of AI driven interactive cinema as some of the other kind of AI based artwork I was doing at CMU. But as far as the theater question specifically, I mean, I've taken a class in improv and I've sort of hung out with theater people, but I myself, I mean, that's as far as it's gone.
Sure.
But the Oz project that you were part of, their their framing was theater, right? Which came out
Yeah,
of
yeah, theater and animation. Yeah. So, like the Disney animation Bible called The Illusion of Life. It's a big hardback book about sort of how the Disney animators figured out to, bring their characters to life so that they felt like they were really lifelike. That was sort of a big reference point for the Oz project, where sort of studying those techniques in detail. And it's like, well, how do we do that procedurally? How do we do that with code? And so there was definitely a lot of paying detailed attention to the dramatic arts generally, whether that's cinema or theater or animation. Yeah.
but it's safe to say we have, and I still personally have an allergic reaction to non-interactive cutscenes in games.
Yes.
Like, I hate them. We're not the most pure form of this is not a movie that you can interact with. We understand the need to tell story in games. You need to sometimes set up the gameplay with the story that's happening, and cutscenes are beautiful to look at because they're well crafted little movies.
Yeah.
But we really didn't want to make anything cutscene like, so that was another reason but the main reason is that, again, real-time simulation of characters is inherently kind of like theater, like drama. That's why we chose that.
A quick fire question from the Reddit from Wolf Donut 3, who simply asks, "Who is your favorite, Tripp or Grace?"
Well, first I want to credit the actors that played
Yeah,
Tripp and Grace, because they brought so much. They really brought
absolutely.
these characters to life. So at the time I was living in Chicago, and went to some of the wonderful improv groups there. And down the street from where I lived was the Neo Futurists, which is still around. It was a group experimental theater, some of you may know, if you live in Chicago. And they had a show called Too Much Light Makes the Baby Go Blind, where over a 60-minute period they invent like 30 short plays. It's a really cool experimental theater and these amazing actors, and basically put out a casting call with them and found our actors, Chloe Johnston, who plays Grace, and Andy Bayates, who plays Tripp, and they're still Andy's also a playwright. Chloe's a professor now of theater at a college in Illinois. So they're active theater people. So yeah, really, So, but in turn, okay, the question: Do we have a favorite, Grace and Tripp? No, I love them both. I love them both. And again, just the performances that the actors gave. I couldn't choose between the two personally. I don't know about you, Michael.
No,
Maybe Tripp.
I can't
No?
choose either. No, I love them both, and I love their tortured dynamic with each other. So
What was it like?
I feel for them.
Yes, I mean, what was it like just from that question? What was it like recording with them? Because it's quite an unusual
Yeah,
situation.
they had no idea.
Yeah.
It took, I think we recorded 60 hours total of audio that ended up getting edited down
Wow,
to
60
whatever. I
hours.
think there's a total of 5 or 6 hours of audio in the system in the end. And anytime you play it, it's only around 15, 20 minutes long. So that gives you a sense of the number of, potential. You're only seeing at any one time a small percentage of the total things they could say. But yeah, it was tedious. But and the actors didn't really know.
What's happened there? Oh, got a little.
They were really patient. We didn't have much money to pay them, so they worked for cheap. So
Sorry,
thanks to them.
my Discord just did a little blip there. You froze for a second, but I think I got what you were saying there. So I mean, on that point, I guess. Sorry, video games. I suppose, do you have the original recording somewhere still? 60 hours. That's a crazy amount of time.
Yeah, we still have all of it. Yeah.
I do want to mention too,
Yes, of course,
Chloe Johnston, who played Grace. She came through Santa Cruz several years ago. I think it was before the pandemic, just before the pandemic, and we had a really nice conversation about sort of, I think she's also surprised at seeing Façade's longevity, and I guess on a pretty regular basis gets requests from people who want her to record in Grace's voice, like new lines and stuff
really?
for videos they're making. And so she was putting together a one-person show about the experience of playing Grace in Facade and just sort of the aftermath and that. And I know that she's done a first version of that show. I got sent some photos where the stage was arranged to look like the apartment. So there was the Grace and Tripp's
Amazing.
apartment, and then she's on it doing the one-person show about being Grace. I don't know. I don't think I think that was sort of like an early run of it, but I think that's a really amazing idea. I would love to see the fully developed version of that.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, I'd love to find out a bit more about that as well. We've just had a couple of people raid in. So hello, everybody. Thanks for joining the chat. Let me get. Sorry, there's so many questions here. We've been talking a little bit about the playthroughs of the game and how popular it's become on kind of Let's Plays and YouTube and things like that. But I mean, seeing as there are so many elements to it, are there still secrets out there? Are there things that haven't been discovered from your knowledge?
Not from our knowledge, unless there's some bug where some lines or possibilities somehow don't ever happen. As far as we know, everything's been found.
Yeah. One of the hardest probably beats to get to is where Tripp awkwardly reenacts his asking Grace to marry him.
Oh yes.
So
had that.
He does this awkward reenactment. Okay, yeah. So that's probably one of the more obscure beats, because you have to have been pushing them in a consistent way for like multiple beats beforehand for that to be a possibility. So if you've seen that, then you've seen one of the more obscure pieces of content.
You got down on one knee to me, so yes.
Yes, yeah. No, it's it's supposed to be painful. Yes. I don't know if it felt painful.
It was. We will move on to other things shortly. A quick question as well from Vicky in the chat, who says, are the player names, because there's lots of player names obviously you can pick to be people and Vicky specifically says like Gonzalo. I don't know if she
Yes.
I thought that might be the case.
Well, it just earlier in this talk mentioned that debate that was happening at the time in academia, ludology versus narratology. So Gonzalo Frasca was one of our friends, an academic who was deep in that debate. So he's a game developer. He still makes games. He lives in Uruguay. So yeah, a friend of ours who's sort of a known figure back then in that debate.
And
Ginevra was one of the neo-futurists and ended up eventually getting married to the actor that played Tripp.
Oh right, yes, I think someone mentioned that in the chat as well. Yeah, that's cool. I figured that must have been the case, but that's cool to know. And Furman in the chat also asks, I notice in the game files one of Grace's has an ejection name. Was Grace originally capable of kicking you out?
Probably not.
I was going to say some of these questions, but it might be, it has been nearly 20 years on, so it's sometimes kind of hard to remember. But
no, I don't think we ever expected her to push you out.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Possibly, maybe.
Obscure question.
Yes, it is. Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
You're going to get some obscure because this is the thing. People still love this game. That's the thing.
Great.
I will. Let me see. What else was I going to ask you? I suppose that there is another question about the drama management in general and how that kind of worked, because I suppose it seems like you said you did it in story beats, but you did it almost feels like acts of a play, and I imagine that was sort of intentional, that it kind of builds to this climax. Is that how you were trying to pace it?
Yeah. So the dramatic beats have kind of two big parts to them. One part is sort of all the information that's used to possibly select the beat. It's the information that's used by the drama manager to decide what beat would be next. And then the other big part of it is sort of, you could think of it as the payload of the beat, which is all of the beat specific behaviors that get kind of layered on top of Grace and Tripp's minds for that beat. So you can sort of think of Grace and Tripp as like they've got this like base level of behaviors of kind of how to do things and how to act like themselves. And then they sort of get this like, brain transplant or brain surgery every beat, where a bunch of new behaviors get layered on top of that are the ones specific for that beat. For the information that is used to decide beats, there's like preconditions that are kind of determining whether that beat is even completely possible or not. But then in any given position in the drama, there's usually a lot of beats that are literally possible. And so then there's a ranking system to decide how likely a beat should be to be selected, basically. And part of that ranking system is looking at the tension arc. So we have this idea of this like ideal tension arc that we're trying to track, which is kind of a classic Aristotelian arc. And then associated with the beats as also information about whether they're raising the tension or not, and by how much. And so as beats happen, we can see how the real tension is deviating or not from the ideal tension. And then beats that bring the story back into line with the ideal tension will tend to get higher ranking. As part of this ranking process, but it's not the only thing involved in the ranking. It's also like topics that the player brings up. So if the player brings up, the couch in the middle of drinks being made, then arguing about the decorating in the couch is like very likely to be the next beat because of that. But that would be, that's going to factor into the ranking. And then at the end, we basically roll dice that are weighted according to these rankings. And so it's not, so it is probabilistic. So you will get, you won't literally get always exactly the same beat in every situation, but they'll be weighted according to this ranking. So that's a super brief description of the drama manager.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yes, I know it's obviously a lot more. It's quite complicated to go into this kind of thing in short answers.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment how this approach this project is traditional symbolic AI. It's sometimes called good old-fashioned AI, where we have created a bunch of content. It's like a huge bag of a whole lot of things that could happen, and we've added metadata to them so that these certain things are about these certain topics and will cause these sort of effects of tension rising or falling. and we have a drama manager who's kind of like trying to figure out what's the player just said something, they could respond with 10 of these things, which is the most dramatically interesting one that's going to move tension well but still stay on topic, versus the latest wave of AI technology, which is out now that everyone knows, large language models, which is a completely different take on how to figure out what to say next, or do next. And it's really, they're obviously super powerful. You know, talk, conversing with something like ChatGPT is incredible. The generative level of how it's coming up with its responses, but it's not very good at this tight, structured control of a dramatic story that's being, really listening to you and making, where characters have intentions and things they have agendas. Grace and Tripp have agendas of things they want to make happen. All the stuff's going to come out tonight. They've got to express themselves. They've got to get it all out. And then depending on what you're doing you're trying to, deal with it and shape the experience. And the drama manager is trying to make it tight and interesting. So it's not clear that these new AI technologies are going to be easily that you can use them to harness them to do the type of things we're doing in Facade. For sure, large language models will be part of the solution to make better, richer, more generative, interactive dramas. And in our current and upcoming projects, we plan to utilize them where we can, but they're not the silver bullet. They're not going to solve this problem, because as you can see, when you play with them, they meander. Even if you try to make them not meander too much, it's not easy to make them do the kind of thing that Facade does. At least the drama management side of it. It's not obvious that that's the only going to solve everything. So it's a really interesting time to try to figure out how to use these large language models in this kind of experience, that interactive drama like games.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, if you don't mind me, I mean, I know in your proposal for Façade, you sort of, you call it a serious attempt to move beyond traditional branching or hyperlink narrative to create a fully realized interactive drama. It's nearly 20 years on, or even when you wrote that, I think it was 2002. So it is over 20 years now. Why does it feel we still haven't got to that point? I mean, obviously there has been, as you mentioned at the beginning, some amazing cinematic games. Recently, Immortality by Sam Barlow. We had Detroit Become Human, but that's still very much. It feels like the game has a certain path and it's taking along that path. I part of the reason perhaps why Facade is still played so much is it still does feel very innovative. But why haven't we moved on since that point?
Yeah, I have a lot to say, but do you want to start?
No, you start, Andrew.
Well, Facade, for what it does well, the kind of stuff we've talked about,
Yeah.
it falls short in a lot of other areas. Its actual gameplay and the puzzle itself in Facade, we feel like we only got maybe 30-ish% along the goals we had for it. As a game, as a puzzle, it could be better for sure. And it's it's a very hard design problem to figure out, again, how to make a game out of people's psychology. So we figured out a few things. In Facade, one of the things that Grace and Tripp do is try to get you to take sides. Whatever the topic is, and we call that the affinity game. It's like a mini game within the story. So coming up with games like that are part of making this an enjoyable, satisfying game experience. And if you're going to make a product that needs to sell units and make money, it has to be satisfying to players. And if we released Facade and charged money for it, and even back then or now, I think a lot of people would be like, okay, this is a really cool project. Where it's free, so I'll play it, and a lot of people enjoy it. But would in the exact form it is, and the level of satisfaction of the puzzles, is it are people going to pay for it yet? And it's not obvious. So one of the reasons why games haven't maybe gone in this exact direction is because the design problems still haven't been fully solved. How do you make a good puzzle game out of psychology and human drama, so that players would be satisfied enough to pay for it? I think that's part of it. And game companies are more conservative. They're making plenty of revenue on existing genres. Like all the stuff we all love of action games, environmental exploration games, and so on. Those sports games. Those make enough money that maybe there just isn't a need to be more experimental exactly and to try to build this exact thing. That's also part of it from their perspective.
And we've been, as I mentioned before in my research group, we've done different directions of trying to explore this idea of psychological puzzles or social puzzles. And so this game Prom Week, which is kind of the week before a American high school prom, it's kind of the hallway politics leading up to it. And that is much more explicitly a puzzle game. Like you're actually given like puzzle goals to solve, have Oswald dating the most popular person while at the same time being disliked by this other person, or so there's these very explicit goals. And we also have much more of a HUD in that game. So Facade, there was very much this design direction of naturalism. That's part of the stage thing. If you're on a theater stage, doing an improv with people, it's not like you have a giant HUD looking at like meter bars, on the characters. Sure. But it does make not having meter bars of various kinds does make it harder to express complicated puzzles and have people figure out how to solve those puzzles. And so Prom Week sort of went a different direction where it's more explicitly puzzly, and there's a lot of interface elements that let you dive into like, why is that character reacting that way? And we're expressing their motivations still in language, not like the underlying like logic rules or whatever. That's just an example of Andrew talking about how this is kind of an unsolved problem. Is there's like a lot of different directions you can take it, and and Prom Week
one of the most successful games of all time, The Sims. It doesn't have a lot of story structure. It's at least, especially in its early iterations, was meant to be open-ended simulation. But yeah, right. It shows the bars of the inner workings of what they're feeling. To allow you as the player to very easily tell, are you making them more full, or their various emotional states and so on, which again, like Michael says, we were trying to avoid. We wanted to go as fully natural and purely theatrical as we could. So in our what we've been actively trying to do over the last, since Facade, and off and on over the years, and we have a new concentrated effort on this now, is to get deeper into figuring out how to solve these psychological puzzles, these drama puzzles, to make really satisfying gameplay for gamers, to as well as achieving all of these interactive drama, theatrical presentation goals, to really take it to the next level. So we are actively working on new projects and new prototypes. We have been. It's amazing how much time has passed, and in the meantime we've gone off into. There's been a lot of other things we've done in our lives.
Yeah.
We haven't been working on it, and not every moment, but we have been prototyping over the years, and we do plan and hope to release more of these, and as fully realized products.
Okay. I mean, I think this is a good point to ask a little bit more about sort of projects you're possibly working on at the moment. I don't know if I know, because obviously, Andrew, as you said, you're part of Playable Studios, and then Michael, you're also working there, but you're also obviously a professor of computer science, and you're director of the Center for Games and Playable Media at the University of California, Santa Cruz. But it feels like it sounds like are you working together on something or separate projects?
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, so I'm involved in kind of advising at Playable, and so we have regular conversations. But I haven't been involved in the detailed prototyping. And actually, my uh, hope very much is that within the next year or two, I'll be able to become much more involved in more of the details of the kind of prototyping and design process. Um, in terms of explicit follow-ons to Facade, I think maybe Andrew, you should just say a little bit about some of the work that's been going on in Playable that would be
Yeah,
Facade follow-ons. Yeah.
right. So the quick history is right after Facade, the iPhone came out, and I had another game studio here in Portland called Stumptown Game Machine, where we built the first virtual pets for the iPhone. So we did that for a few years. Then Michael had this awesome research project at his lab with in collaboration with a bunch of other labs to build a training simulator, a
Yes.
training system for teaching police and military recruits social skills, how to de-escalate um, situations in a combat zone or a foreign place or
Right.
in a on the streets for the police. And
It
so
was basically interactive drama for teaching de-escalation skills with
Right.
sort of like, whole body acting in front of a screen with, large characters and a camera looking at
right.
you
And this is right
and
before
all that
VR
jazz.
came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It would have been VR had VR. This was in like 2012 to 2010 to
Yeah.
2012 and 13. So and then we met. There was a graduate student of Michael's lab named Larry LeBron who joined that project, and I met him there. And then eventually, once that project was done, and I think the Army ended up installing it in a classroom somewhere as a training simulator. Um, Larry and I, with Michael, formed Playable with the goal to bring interactive dramas to the market. And that was about 10 years ago now. So we initially began prototyping a potential sequel to Facade or other ideas around that space. There was an interview we did back then for the Atlantic Monthly where we
Yes.
talked about a project called The Party, which is similar to Facade. The idea being uh, there's some sort of gathering of people at like a house or an apartment, but there's more characters, more than just two. There's a 10 characters, and something's going on. Some drama's happening. For example, maybe someone gets murdered, and you're in the middle of this, and you have to figure out what to do. And you would probably replay it. It would probably end with a certain end early, and you'd have to figure out how do I replay it. So that's an example of a game we are actually actively prototyping and trying to again integrate the newest tech, the large language models into the architecture to really bring this to life and figure out the puzzle designs. But also along the way, the metaverse came into
Yes.
everyone's consciousness, and so Larry and I did a lot of work on metaverse style projects in AR and VR, a lot of stuff with Oculus Quest or AR for iPhone and Android. Did a whole slew of things. If you go to our website, you'll see the variety of projects we worked on. So those are great and really interesting, but to some extent a distraction from our primary goal to get back to building interactive dramas. So we are now actively working on that.
Right, which is very exciting because that was by far the most common question I had from people that wanted to know. So to confirm, would it still be that kind of idea, the party, or is it more that you're working on
Mhm.
different interactive dramas,
Yeah,
or in what sense is
yeah.
it still?
Something like The Party
Yeah.
could arguably be a sequel to Facade. I mean, it's Grace and Tripp could be one of the couples at this party potentially, or it'll just at least be very much like that, but bigger and better.
Mhm.
And
And
that's
I'm at a place now where I could work on a sequel to Facade. Like I think for many years I was kind of tired of Trip and Grace.
sure.
It was
Yeah.
also that development process that Andrew highlighted, the 5 years we're working on it, were pretty brutal. I mean, for both of us, it was like a blood, sweat, and tears project to get Facade released over that 5 years. And so I think there was a little bit of trauma from the development
Preparation.
experience. But I actually feel really excited about the idea of an explicit sequel to Facade, and kind of revisiting Grace and Tripp and seeing, where are they at now, what's going on with them. But whether that is what we do or not,
Right.
I mean, this is yeah. We do want to do something that
part of it
involves
will
more
depend on,
characters,
Sure.
which is the party involves more characters. Yeah.
and part of it will depend on, as we try to raise money to pay for the project, what funders
Yeah.
just think would be the most successful product. Yeah, it's good.
So
It's not solely our decision. We
no,
need to
no,
get
of
funding.
course. And so you're kind of in. I guess it's not something you've necessarily. Although obviously at the time, I know you put quite a lot of work into it and then kind of left it there. But is it kind of it's something you'd like to do, but you're not started working on, or what's the kind of?
No, we are actively
Okay.
doing
Oh right.
prototypes
Okay.
and seeing what we can accomplish and what designs work and don't work. Yep. So it is, yes, it actively being prototyped.
That's exciting. I suppose to kind of round this off as well, it would be a bit remiss really to not to ask you a bit about where we're at with artificial intelligence in gaming at the moment. We're at a bit of a crossroads, it seems, where once it was perhaps seen as just this very interesting thought experiment that could potentially really progress the industry. Now, quite understandably, there's a lot of people concerned it could destroy that industry. I suppose, how do you both see where we're at with AI in gaming? Where are we going right and where are we going wrong, maybe, with it? It's quite a broad question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's a very real concern that people might be put out of work, developers put out of work by these technologies, and it's technologies that were trained without their permission on the stuff that they produced, right? So it's sort of like I think for a lot of creatives there's this sense of like being put out of work by a technology that was trained on the stuff they made, which is I think particularly galling. um, my personal interest in like large language models in particular. So I look at LLMs and experiment with those a lot more than I do with the sort of image generation systems, though I play with those as well. But for large language models, I'm most interested in them actually as reasoning systems, as common sense reasoning systems. And so, kind of building on what Andrew was saying about how it's very unclear that an LLM kind of solves the problems of interactive drama end to end. Like, could you really? I think the interesting work is going to be work that combines like LLMs as like one piece of much larger architectures that still have lots of authored content in the larger architecture, but the LLM is able to sort of elaborate or amplify on that authored content, but even more importantly, do common sense reasoning. Because by common sense reasoning, I mean being able to reason about things like, how would someone tend to respond positively or negatively if blah 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 some situation,
Okay. Yeah.
right? And normally now you would have to code that up as rules, kind of using rule-based AI or something, and it's very hard to hit all the cases, and there's always some case you didn't think of, and so on. And so the promise of common sense reasoning was that it would sort of would have like broad coverage. And LLMs, in my, having worked in AI, sort of academically and as a developer since like 1996,
Yeah.
this is the by far the closest that I've seen us come to having something that could be legitimately considered sort of a common sense reasoner with broad coverage. And so that's really exciting. But that's a very different use case. Like the use case everyone is always talking about is like content generation.
Yeah.
And actually, content generation is one of I'm just not that interested
Yeah.
in the content generation abilities. I'm interested in these reasoning abilities. I do think from a writing perspective that writers working with LLMs, an LLM could be used to allow them to explore, to do a lot of writing explorations.
Yes.
And so I'm really interested in the idea of, and in fact, there's some work in my research group currently. So, we're not ignoring the LLM revolution in the
Sure.
expressive intelligence studio. And one thrust of the work has been developing tools for writers that leverage LLMs to then, but there's like a nice interface for the writer to kind of say, give me alternatives to this phrase, or what if I wanted to change the tone in this way, or what, and so it becomes a kind of like a smart assistant to the writer.
Yes.
But that's a very different use case than replacing writers. That's actually empowering writers. So I'm interested in the empowerment and reasoning capabilities, and very disinterested in the replacement capability. And frankly, I think people who try to do straight up replacement are basically just going to be putting a lot of like lackluster content in their games. So
and then another sort of just business side of it is if game developers want to incorporate large language models into their adventure games, say adventure games or any action adventure games or strategy games, that kind of thing. Right now they're maybe not feasible cost wise. They require these massive computers on servers. It's not clear how do you pay for all that compute time and server time and still charge a reasonable amount for the game. So it's even just sort of economically, it's not obvious. No, maybe the cost of these will come down, and then it'll be more practical to use them. But it is telling that even now there still aren't any major products out there, right, that are sold that use these, as far as I know. The most common use case of them are for coders, helping them write code, which is good. Like sort of like right, Michael's saying, it's like an assistant to help you write things.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, it hasn't yet been integrated into successful games or other apps. So there's a chance that actually the stuff has hit a wall. It's not clear that the pace of acceleration of the curve is going to, it might be that the techniques aren't going to get tons better. The jury's still out of how good this stuff really will be. And it already has a lot of flaws with hallucinations.
Yes. Yeah.
So not obvious what's going to happen next with them.
No, and I guess you kind of hit on it, Michael, with, it's, I suppose, having that reliance on AI, but not to the sense that it then replaces a person. And it's that line really. And I guess it'll just be interesting to see where we go with that. It still feels like we're working that out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we don't believe the hype, basically,
Yeah.
that it's going to just dominate everything. It doesn't seem that way. But and like self-driving cars are another good example. We've been promised it, and Tesla obviously has versions of it in their cars, but I wouldn't turn that on and trust it to drive your. It's not. Jury is still out if the stuff is really going to work reliably.
Yeah, totally. I'm just, if anyone's got any final questions, by the way, we're going to wrap up shortly. We had a question about, I guess, because we were talking about, there's been so many, I'm sure you get sent a lot of fan-made art and various content to do with Facade. I mean, do you still get sent a lot of this stuff? There's someone who's mentioned this fan-made Grace songs. I'm sure there must be so many things. You must be aware of the amount of things that the community is still creating up to this day.
I don't think we've seen it. I think there was a time a little while ago where we did a survey of what's out there, but I'm sure there's plenty we've missed, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But every time we look, it's always so fun to see what everyone's creating.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I tend to get more direct questions about things rather than like here's fan art I made. Like the most kind of interesting recent question, and Andrew actually had to go dig into some old backups to answer it, was what's the source of the Italy photo, the Italy trip photo?
Yeah.
So like, where is that taken? And that's and then we were able to, and because the person was saying like, hey, if I go to Italy, I might want to go on, basically go there and do kind of a pilgrimage and like take that shot, and so Andrew was able to, good on you for having like 20-year-old backups around still that was able to dig into some
ancient image in the game is blurred out, so we found the original.
Oh, amazing.
Right.
Image.
because yeah, we tried to do image search, like reverse image search that you can do, but it's blurred. The filter we applied to give it the kind of cartoon look that's in the game was too extreme for reverse image search to look, and so
I
then
see.
we had to find the original and then do reverse image search to figure out, like, where is this taken.
That's really cool. I didn't realize that at
Yeah.
all. Old Thinker Tube, who has done lots of content about your cells and is very uh, loves Facade, would like to know just with the. I mean, this is maybe too early to know, really, but what would you be your thinking with creating something like the party? Would you use voice actors or computer generated voices? Do you think?
I mean, the state of the art clearly is, speech synthesis that, is created from original voice, from human voices. But no, we would definitely go with full speech synth. And some of it's still not quite there it's there for just the quality is there for just speaking in a normal tone, kind of like we are in this
Yeah.
talk here. But for a mode of actors really crying and yelling and screaming and all the stuff you would want in a great interactive drama, they don't quite do that yet. But probably by the point that we get a project to working, it'll take enough time to get that working that by the time we get there, these speech synth models will hopefully be able to accomplish all that. So I'm sure, almost surely, we will be using the best of the best speech synth. But but again, it goes back to that issue of, well, how much does that cost to use? Is it going to be? That's a big problem business wise. Is it affordable? There's all this power, but can we actually? You have to have your business mindset on too to figure out how to make this into a workable product. So,
and of course, there's the issue that games using speech synth are getting blowback right now. Of course,
Sure.
right? There's some
you can
famous
imagine
case
training
stress right now about
training
that.
voice.
So
You could have your own voice actors where you record a lot of your own source audio to train the model, so
Okay.
using
mhm,
you're not using right
Because it's, I
data that
guess,
will.
yeah, it's like you say, it's getting that level so that it doesn't feel like it still has that emotion and yeah.
Right.
Yes, I think, I mean, I suppose, again, this is probably quite theoretical for you at the moment because this is something you're working on, but would the idea be for in the party, would people be able to get kicked out as video games M12? I mean, again, quite specific, really, because you're still considering what would happen.
Personally, I
But
think that model, the model that we you know innovated in Facade, I still love it.
mm,
Michael, I mean, I think it's safe to say that the way Facade works and the mechanics of it and just the feel of it is what, we'd want to keep that alive, and a lot of it worked really well, and so no reason why we would get rid of that approach, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the goal is to allow players to do and say as much as they can of what they want, give them as much agency, control, ability to express themselves and say what they want, and the game can hear them and listen to them, think about it, and react. That's the goal.
right, yeah, to let players act how they want, but also actions have consequences.
Sure.
So there should
So
be, we want a broad range. If we support a broad range of action, then we also need a broad range of consequences, not that the characters just like blithely continue
yeah,
even when the player is doing
and
it.
if you say something that you deserve to be kicked out, you should get kicked out. Why not? I
Yeah.
mean, especially if the model of the game is replay it to keep replaying it, then why, it fits.
Mhm.
And I guess this is a question from the fans who have been going through all of this even now with Facade and going through the code and things like that. Just asking about, are there any beta builds of Facade still in existence somewhere?
No secret beta builds of no. I think
Mhm.
yeah, we'd love to reveal some Easter eggs or something, but no,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I'm just, yeah,
Yeah,
they want to know, so I'm asking the questions. But
yeah.
um,
I can I can remember a early. This was probably more like an alpha build at a game festival. It was sort of like an art game festival in this probably would have been around 2001
we
or something,
we even had that early
2002.
version at the IGF. We had a
Right.
version that didn't have the
Yeah,
full ending. When we it
right.
was only went about
But
halfway through the story. Yeah.
this was an even earlier one though. This was at IZEA, I think. It was at an IZEA in I can't remember what country right now that was in, and it was I actually have
It was on a
the
ferry from Helsinki to Stockholm.
Oh, wow.
yeah, okay, yeah, and it
It
was
was a
I
festival.
actually I had the beat manager up. And so that was kind of an interesting build, and that people were playing it, but they'd see the beats kind of going click, click, and they could see, it was almost like this like cartoon story arc, and then they'd see their story arc, and they'd see that, so that was sort of a build where we were revealing a little of the behind the scenes and
see.
of the
But we never
drama
packaged it up
manager in
as an
action.
installable. Yeah, it was never something you could just install or something. It was just on our machine. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. That's yeah, that's a completely different way of playing it then, if you can see it as you're going along.
Yeah,
Right.
I guess you're sort of sensing it really when you're playing the game proper and sort of working it out.
In a future project, it would be wonderful if we could show more of the under the hood AI operating in
Yeah.
some future version of something we release. That would be a great part of the system.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well,
Hopefully we can do that.
and people would love that, I'm sure. A random question to finish, which I ask everybody just to get a different question. But do you have a favorite chocolate bar, both of you?
I like Ritter Sport.
So do
like Ritter Sport.
That's the best chocolate.
Yeah, Ritter Sport is awesome.
Yes.
I like the Theo brand.
Just
I don't even
tasty. Know that one.
Yeah, but there's also a local brand here in Portland, Tony's Chocolate. That I love too.
Yes, that is great. Yeah. See, I just like to end on a random question to take us out of it, and it's always interesting to hear what people say. But I'll let you guys go now. I really appreciate you coming on, and it's been great just to hear about Facade, but also very excited to hear. That it looks like there's a potential project in the making for a sequel or some kind of similar project. But yeah, thank you both.
Hopefully it won't take.
No,
it's already been a long time since Facade came out, so
Well,
we are working on it, but it's a really hard problem. So
yeah.
be patient. Thank you everyone. Keeping the hope alive.
Oh, honestly, look, they're all very excited. They're very happy to hear about that. But thank you again for coming on. And I guess if people do want to get more updates about this, or what's the best place for them to find out about these kind of things?
I mean, yeah. So on the Playable Studios website, there's a way to fill out a contact form, and we get people asking questions, and we apologize that we don't tend to respond in general. We're just don't always have the time, and we don't necessarily have a good answer to some of your questions, but that is a way to get a hold of us. We should create some sort of sign up for a mailing list type of thing when there's more to say, and we'll do that to make sure that we'll start reaching out more to the community. But we want
it shows how old school we are when we're talking about a mailing list. I think what's being fished for here is what's our social media presence, and I can basically say I don't maintain one. Yes, I have accounts on various platforms, but I'm not an active participant. So.
Well, I can't blame you, to be honest.
But yeah, when we're ready, we will.
You will. Okay,
out.
great. And please do let me know, because I'll be very interested to hear about more. But I'll let you guys go now. Thank you so much again. Really appreciate it, Michael and Andrew. I'm really looking forward to the future and everything you're going to be working on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much, guys. Bye.